Hi guys, this is the Marketing Communications Crash Course. It's a concept crunch where I essentially go over all the concepts and things we've discussed in the past 8 sessions. It condenses everything that we've already gone over so that you can have a small revision before your exam tomorrow. So let's just go to the deck. Cool. Right. So marketing communications, session 1, we spoke about how there's been a shift in brand communications from being periodic to continuous. Periodic is when they used to have season-based campaigns because the speed at which you interacted with your consumer was less. However, now the speed at which you interact with your consumer is way faster due to social media for obvious reasons. So that is something that we discussed, that instead of like a Diwali campaign, there is an always on communication that goes on with your consumers and with all other stakeholders that you have. Then there is, we discussed the focus on integration. For example, we have integrated media planning as a subject. What that basically implies is that there should be a sense of synergy in terms of the messaging and the positioning across different channels and across different platforms. For example, if I'm a brand that cares about children on LinkedIn, I also need to be a brand that cares about children on radio or on newspaper, if those are platforms that apply to me. One site, one sound, you have the same messaging across different channels. That's basically what integration means. It's to consolidate your messaging. Then there is the promotion mix tools, which I'll just explain the purpose of each of them so that you are aware of, okay, when you have to put a plan together, if that is the kind of question we get tomorrow, you know what to do. So advertising is about buying in like general, as a general idea, like it would be a good idea for you to buy this product. Sales promotion, however, is very specifically a call to action to buy now. For example, a discount code, that is a call to action to buy now or to buy within 24 hours. PR or public relations is about overall corporate reputation, goodwill, and credibility. It's also kind of about customer relationship management because, again, like we discussed earlier, integration, a lot of these boundaries have started blurring. Then there is personal selling, which is building customer relationships. So this is about customer management directly, and it's also about like direct sales to a person. Direct marketing is not the same as direct sales. Direct marketing is when you send your messaging to an individual based on data that you have on them. For example, targeted Facebook ads. Those are direct marketing initiatives. So yeah, those are some of the tools and the promotion mix. Other than that, some key concepts from this session: segmentation, targeting, positioning. This is stuff we've done earlier. You can check back on your notes with Melodia. So that is pretty important to have because it might help you if she gives a question like, okay, here's this product, put together a marketing plan for it or put together a campaign for it. Having your STP there, at least to gauge your target audience, helps. 4Ps, again, this is a concept we're all very familiar with at this point. Finally, the last concept is marketing communication tetrahedron. Now, the thing is, we didn't really discuss this in class properly. There is a PDF of this in the session 1 folder. It's the lengthy PDF as well, I would say. It's not complicated, it's just lengthy. If you want to cover all your bases, you can do this. I'm personally not spending too much time on it because we've not actually discussed it in class. Also, the format of the paper is pretty short answers. This would be like a 15-mark answer. So read it if you want to cover your bases. Otherwise, I would say it's okay to skip it. Okay, session 2, we spoke about the theory of persuasion, which is basically understand your consumer. It's kind of like KYC, know your customer. Know who you are trying to persuade, because once you understand them, that's when you're able to tell them a good story. Another thing you need to consider when you're marketing is who is buying. There are different customer roles that people take up within a family or in general as a customer. For example, we discuss the case of buying a car often, how a child tends to be an influencer in that decision, but the final decision maker tends to be the father or the main source of income in the household. So these different roles, when you understand them, it also makes it easier for you to craft communications for them. So if you're an FMCG brand and you're trying to sell biscuits, you will technically in your head, it makes sense that, okay, the money is coming from the father, I should make an ad targeting the father. But no, the decision maker for biscuits in the family is the child. And so you have to make sure that your ad is trying to talk to that person and not just the person who has the money in their hand. So yeah, these are some of the roles. Other than that, buyer user is also important because sometimes it's very utilitarian, the focus that a consumer has with your product. And then sometimes talking about that utilitarian purpose itself also helps you achieve your goal of sales. Some key concepts here: consideration set, customer evaluation. I would say just look up the definitions of these. Elaboration likelihood model is about how consciously you think about making a decision. There's a video linked to this. I'll also show you, like, I think a picture later. But mostly, I think one thing you should focus on is the FCV grid. FCB named after the people who started the agency FCB in India. They're called FCB Alka. Right. So here you're looking at the 4 quadrants of the FCB grid. You have quadrant 1, which is informative. It's high involvement and thinking. So here basically you're talking about products that are very high value. They're purchased once in a lifetime. The consumer spends a lot of time thinking about it. It's a very logical decision, and their involvement in the decision is also very high. Like, they're not going to just let it happen randomly. So big investments, lifetime investments, come under this, like cars or property or land, etc. Quadrant 2 is affective. These are products that are valuable. So, like, there is high involvement, but it's more about your emotions as opposed to your logic. For example, a sari for your wedding. That is more of a feelings decision than a thinking decision, but it still costs a bomb. So, different thought pattern there. Quadrant 3 is habitual, something that you just buy on the regular. You are very low involved in that. There's not, you don't sweat your choice of laundry detergent that much, right? But you do have to repeatedly purchase it. So your involvement is low, but you're thinking about, like, okay, how much money do I really want to spend on this, is pretty high. Coming to quadrant 4, satisfaction. These are like impulse purchases. This is fully emotion based and very low involvement. Like, it doesn't affect your life that much. It just makes you happy for a little bit. So stuff like fast food, confectionaries, you know how they place gum near the checkout counter, so you just pick up a stack of gum. That's basically what comes here. So you can use this framework to kind of determine where a certain product is, and then choose to craft your communication around that. Okay, let's go to session 3. Session 3 is all about advertising. We started talking about advertising. So the current challenge, really, if you summarize the entire PPT, is about engagement. For advertising, it is about engaging customers and having a conversation with them where the customer feels involved with the brand and not just like being sold to. Some of the places where advertising is used is product lifecycle management, which is basically where you have to ensure that you don't cross that line into obsolescence. New market entries, where you would use advertising as well. Positioning and repositioning your brand. For example, if you need to rebrand yourself, changing a logo, changing a tagline, whatever it is. Glow and Lovely would be a good example to use here. Supporting other promotion pillars, for example, Bacardi doing Bacardi and its 7 weekender, that could be an example here. Essentially bringing attention to other stuff that you also do that just generally builds your brand reputation. Relationship marketing and commercializing a new product. Okay, basically have a new launch within your brand category, and to make sure money is flowing towards it to draw awareness to that product. Now, let's talk about high control, medium control, and low control marketing communications. It's just randomly mentioned on a slide, but I thought I'd dive into this because this is a pretty important concept. High control is where you have full control of what you are going to talk about on a certain platform. So owned media, which is like your own Instagram page, your own Facebook page, your own, suppose you own a building and you have own a billboard on the side of that, that is owned media. You can dictate in exact terms what communication goes up there. Medium control is paid media. So you can, some brands do, pay journalists for a feature, and there is a certain degree of creative control that you give up there, because obviously that brand or that paper or whatever it is has certain guidelines by which they write, and they change it for like their own platform. So that is kind of a medium control scenario. Low control is where you have like almost zero control on what like advertising you're getting, and low control is often where crisis comes in, because earned media, where people are writing about you without consulting you, can either be great for you because either you're going viral, or it can be really bad for you because you've done something bad and people are discussing it. So the concept of owned, paid, and earned media and how control varies across them is pretty important to know. Some key concepts: there's the advertising response matrix, which again is not complicated, but it's very lengthy. We haven't really done this in class, so I don't think it's going to come tomorrow. But I have still put a screenshot of it in this deck if you'd like to refer to it, and it will be in the session 3 drive folder shared by the RA. Role of advertising in successful marketing. There's like a little bit about that on the deck, but basically it's about like how to use all this stuff, PLC, new market entry, positioning, repositioning, to have a successful marketing campaign. And elements of effective advertising: strategy, creativity, and execution. You can put this, it's not really a framework, it's more of like things to ponder before you put a creative thought down. Strategy is what we want to say, creativity is how we want to say it, execution is how do we really want to say it. That's how you can think of it. Okay, this is the advertising response matrix. I've taken the screenshot from the PDF. It is a good framework. Definitely read up on it. From an exam point of view, I don't know how likely we are to get stuff from this, other than maybe like a small question about one of these segments. I would definitely say read through it. It's too long for me to explain in this video, but yeah. Session 4. Okay, we discussed advertising agencies here. There's some stuff which I will dive into here because we spent a lot of time discussing them in class, which makes me feel like we would have to spend more time answering it in the paper as well. There's a couple of types of agencies that we spoke about. There's full service agencies, which basically give you a whole host of services. They will give you public relations also. They will do media planning and buying for you also. They will manage your communications. They will manage your online response management. They will do basically everything. They will also do your ATL, BTL stuff. They will send personalized emails to your customers, and they will also like do billboards and TVCs and everything. So they do everything. Then you have creative boutiques. These are usually almost like production houses. For example, Kulfi Collective, I think they used to be called, man, they came for placements this year as well. Sorry, I've forgotten the name. I'm sorry, Prabhuti. But yeah, these guys are pretty cool. Kulfi Collective, I know Jugaad Motion Pictures also does something like this. They're basically a creative boutique. They create films or they create like art for the purpose of being used in commercials, but they don't necessarily get in on the business part of it. That's one way of putting it. Then you have media buying, which is purely focused on like purchasing space in different like medias. For example, buying a TVC slot or buying space in a paper, or even media planning online, which is like Facebook ads, campaign manager, all that stuff. That is a media buying agency. Digitas by Publicis is a good example. Some key concepts. Okay, we'll dive into agency workflow and core roles after this. The butterfly and 360 approach, again, we haven't really gone into this in depth, so I wouldn't say you have to do it, but it's definitely good to read up for case comps and all, so I'll just go over it briefly. Agency workflow is that big blue thing on the top. Basically, there's the client, there's the account management team. The account management team is both client facing and creative facing. They're the bridge between the creative team and the like everyone else inside the agency and the client. The account management team, frankly, has like, I would say, the worst job, um, because I didn't enjoy handling clients when I worked there and I moved to creative. But yeah, they act as the conduit between the client and the creative team, and they kind of translate the client brief into a creative brief to then take to the creative team to work with. So they understand, okay, this is the target group, this is the thing you want to sell, this is the kind of messaging you kind of want. They understand that, and then they kind of translate that for the creative team to work on. Other than that, I think the rest of this is very self-explanatory. Account planning does the actual creative thought. Like your copy team tends to be in account planning often, because the people writing the copy are also the ones coming up with like what exactly the concept of the campaign is. Media planning is, as discussed earlier, the people who decide where ads are going to be placed. Core structure is basically this, like the same thing as discussed before. Account management, client facing, they think about what are the issues, who do we need to talk to, what should we say. Copy and art decides how do we say it, what platforms even are we saying it on. That is often a decision made by copy and account planning teams. Media planning is where are we putting the ads, at what frequency, at what cost. Media planning teams are not often involved in the creative process, but creative teams often do get involved with media planning, because there's always new and innovative places where you can place your advertisement that might come from the creative team, at least in my experience. This is the butterfly thing that we were talking about. It's basically managing an account that you have, how to like have a 360-degree operating system and meet every possible problem that your client could have. You can just pause and go through this. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, not discussed a lot in class, so I wouldn't say focus on it. Also, this would be a really long answer, so I don't think it's going to come. Okay, session 5, the creative brief. These set of questions is a great way to write a creative brief for like a product that you have or a service that you have. What is the key challenge we're facing? For example, you're trying to sell cycles to teenagers in Bombay. The issues they're facing, the issue you're facing, key challenges that they're not buying enough. And then you have to understand what your consumer is, and is the key challenge for the consumer is they don't have space in Bombay to ride a cycle, or they're scared of traffic. Whatever it is, you arrive at your key insight. Here is the phase where you'll probably do stuff like focus grouping, all the research stuff that AD talks about in his lectures. That's, you do that here. Who are we talking to is where you determine your exact target group. Here is also where you would put in consumer personas, which is not the same thing as your target group. You're narrowing it down and kind of deciding a person to talk to. What do they think feel do currently is an expansion of who are we talking to? How do we want to change or reinforce this? Self-explanatory. If we could convince them of one thing, what would that be? So this is like kind of, it can either be a USP, a utilitarian thing, an emotional thing, whatever it is. You have to kind of decide your key message that you're going to communicate, because you can't have a very noisy advertisement, because then the like communication gets lost. You need to have one key takeaway that the consumer kind of comes away with. It doesn't even have to be very specific. It can be just a vague feeling of, like, you know how Nike ads make you feel, you just vaguely feel inspired. It's not a specific takeaway of I need to go buy Nike shoes, but the goal has been accomplished. The goal was to make you feel good and to have like that association of like inspiration and motivation with Nike. That is that one convincing thing that you need to focus on. Why should they believe us is you backing it up with like um the features of the brand, or even like the messaging that you're trying to talk about. And how will we know if they're succeeding is where you set up your metrics for success. For example, if you're doing a video ad campaign and one of the things you want to do is like get number of people to sign up for something, like okay, at the end of the video you're like, okay, sign up for this to get more updates on this or whatever. You know that people have watched the entire video and are interested in it and have been sold on the concept by the ad by based on the number of signups you get on that portal. So stuff like that, assigning metrics to see how well your communication has done. Other than that, even reach and engagement is often considered one of the metrics of success. Most advertising agencies that deal in social media, digital communications, will take reach and engagement, especially engagement, as like a metric for success. Like, oh, we want to reach like 5,000 retweets or whatever. There is a TED talk. Luckily, this is a TED talk that has the transcript because it's on the TED website. I would say read it, but the basic gist of it is the power of reframing things, which is also what a creative brief is about. You don't have just a simple problem and you say, I can solve that problem for you. It's more than that. Choose your frame of reference and the perceived value, and therefore the actual value is completely transformed. It's basically shifting mindsets to view things from a different way so that you're more inclined to like take it up or not take it up, whatever your goal is. I'd say read it. He gives a lot of interesting examples that you can use in answers tomorrow if we get those kind of questions. But yeah, it's easily control plus affable. Some key concepts here: personal versus non-personal channels, which is basically personal channels are sales, non-personal channels are advertising. It's kind of like ATL, BTL, like above the line is like everyone is able to kind of see the advertising. That's a non-personal channel. And below the line is like very personal, where you have like targeted emailers or WhatsApp messages or whatever it is. That's the difference. Differences in information processing, self-paced versus externally paced. I would say just go through like the introductory note in the session 5 doc. It talks about like how when you see an advertisement, what kind of environment you are in also changes the way you process that information and what key takeaway you come up from. Session 6 is advertising strategy, how to craft a campaign, what is your major idea and how to communicate it. This has like one big concept that is very easy to understand, I would say. We'll just look at it here. This is the concept, building blocks. You have to choose. Remember, we were talking about the one thing earlier, that like, what is the thing that your consumer is coming away from when they're looking at that ad? You have to choose one of these or a multitude of these and then craft your campaign or your communication. So attribute is basically where you're talking about a feature or an ingredient of a product. Benefit is the way the product affects your life. What value does it bring to you, not just the problem it solves for you. Role is more of an emotional turn of things. It's always a very corporate communication type thing. The brand purpose, its reason for being, and its mission and vision are often where that role comes from. For example, like Apple talking about being like innovative. We bring that innovative energy to your life. suppose. That is what they're trying to do. They're not trying to sell you a product. They're trying to sell you the feeling of innovation. That's the role. um, Territory is basically based on like where it originates from or where it kind of exists in your life. Like for example, nostalgia would be something that comes with the territory. Like, oh, we're selling you the experience of like being in school, bata shoes, something like that. But that's what territory is. And attitude, territory can also be physical, by the way. It can be like Bombay, like you want Bombay ka chai, we will deliver Bombay ka chai to your house. Makes you feel like you're in Bombay. That is also territory. But often people tend to use emotional territories instead, like nostalgia or like everything else. Attitude is basically the brand, company, or user attitude. This is more along the lines of like the Nike ad that I spoke about earlier. What like does it make you feel, and what attitude does the brand have? Like what's a good example? You know, when these like smaller news companies talk about being anti fake news or anti clickbait or anti paywall, those kind of communications are attitude communications, and we believe in free communication. That is something that would come under attitude. Okay, session 7 is basically about public relations and crisis communication. There is a very interesting TED talk that has been given. I have pasted some points from another website as well, just to understand what crisis management, um, what she talks about in her crisis management video. Basically, what has happened now is that there is a heightened expectation of two-way communication and transparency in crisis due to social media. Like when an accident happens, there's immediately a post of it up. And you as a brand don't have time to think of a response and like then deal with it. And you have to be ready to respond and communicate, because otherwise things can spin out of control. Like let's just take the Coca-Cola example. um when Cristiano Ronaldo gave a, like refused to have Coke, the stock crashed, and as a company you don't have time to like craft communication and think like, oh my god, what do I do here? So the main point that she gets at in her video is that just be proactive, which is, I don't know how helpful that advice is, but that's what she says. So like if she says, what does Melissa Agnes ask in the TED talk, you just say be proactive. So she says that like if you constantly think about what could go wrong and then try to mitigate it beforehand, you will have to deal with less of these situations in start, and when the situations do happen, you're prepared to deal with it, which you, any PR agency will tell you, you're constantly just thinking of the worst case scenario and preparing contingency plans for it and submitting it. That's basically it. The talk that ma'am had with the guest, there's basically kind of just general functions of PR. It's a lot of what we've already discussed, how PR has become more than press. It has become more than just press releases and journalist interactions. It has become more consumer facing as well, as opposed to being just corporate. PR also, unlike a lot of people may not know this, but is also for internal companies. For example, Marico, I remember, had come to us to draft and like internal communications thing, because they wanted to have uplifting messages for employees and have like a good reputation of the brand internally as well. Public relations is not always external. And that is not actually the kind of thing HR manages. That is the kind of thing public relations teams that expert like have expertise in internal communication management, that is something they do. That's not something HR does, which a lot of people don't know that. She also spoke about the difference between PR and brand reputation. The fact is that they're not really that different. They've kind of started to coagulate into one. They are almost the same now because you can't really differentiate between them. Crisis communication, one of the main things she mentions is being honest to your brand and being honest to your consumers, because if you appear guilty, they will immediately take you down. You cannot appear guilty or appear like you're trying to hide it. But that's basically the crux of the discussion we had there. Session 8, last session, online response management. I've pasted some definitions and information from other places on the internet, because we did not unfortunately get any reading material either for this session or the session before this one. So just so that you understand what ORM is, it is a process of like maintaining the brand name. It's part of the PR team's function often, like at least at my PR agency, ORM was something we managed. Through all kinds of mediums, which includes Google searches, social media sites, social networking sites. But the best way of like putting it is online community management as opposed to online response management, because these are all communities of people, online or offline, who are discussing you. You have to enter those spaces and make sure the right messages are being discussed. That is basically what ORM is. Like for example, in the video, the dude talks about like how they would go into Amazon customer reviews and like combat the bad ones, or like figure out what are customers saying. That is the kind of stuff that is done, and usually this is done by agencies. It's very hard for brands to do this because it's just a lot of work. You kind of have to outsource that work. And the key is synergy across platforms, integration, which is throwback to the first lecture. That is something we discussed as well. Because for example, if you're a big, like for if you're Amazon only and you have both like consumer durables people complaining and you have like FMCG people complaining, you need to have an understanding of what like the communication policy is and what the like response is. Like often agencies have an online response management sheet that is updated where they literally predict every possible situation that could happen, and they write a response for that. And then on Twitter, when you get a response, that has been copy pasted from that Excel sheet. So that's basically what synergy is about, that you have kind of a similar communication across platforms. Some other things that ORM does is eliminate negative branding, manage consumer complaints. For example, when you tweet at a brand or when you tag them in a LinkedIn post saying your laptop doesn't work, that is part of complaint management. Removal of complaints once they've been addressed, removing false or bad reviews, responding to negative comments, getting rid of negative comments coming at the top of search results, and putting for positive feedback, which is, you know, it's a debatable thing to do, planting feedback, but you know, people do it. Some brands definitely do it. Focusing on providing value and being prompt with customer response. You know, when Spotify or like you tag any brand and they don't respond for like 5 to 6 hours, you get more pissed off. And then, so being prompt as well, dealing with the massive influx of customer requests is very important and also part of ORM, and predicting those requests and closing them as soon as possible. Why you need ORM, if we had a question along these lines? To monitor and protect your brand image from negative impressions, increasing your visibility on the web as well. I would not say like SEO, SEM is really part of this, but it kind of ties in. Increasing digital footprints, gaining more customer trust with time because you're managing consumer relations again. Proper and prompt responses to all comments and mentions, and getting insights about how customers perceive your brand. Now, this is actually very important. I haven't written it here. Social listening is a thing that PR brands and ORM agencies do. It's basically where you actually collate data about negative mentions, positive mentions, specific product mentions, and gain insights from that. For example, if you introduced a new thing on your platform, if you are Twitter and you like introduced a place where like you can retweet a tweet to a private account or something, you can track mentions and the language used about this new feature, and you can gain an insight on, did people like this, what else do they like to see. You can get a lot if you're seeing what your customers are talking about online or even offline, but mostly this does happen online. The person who came for this talk is from Meltwater. I would highly suggest going to their website and having a look. They do a pretty good job. But yeah, that's it. Best of luck for the exam tomorrow. You got this. Bye.